We knew that income inequality was bad, both in America and around the globe, but we have some new evidence that we desperately need to. Not that we actually have the ability to tax people in other countries necessarily, even if they're corporations that are really based here, but we've got some bad news. Just 62 ultra-rich individuals, a list that is primarily made up of men and includes Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, the Koch brothers, and the Walmart heirs, have as much money as the bottom half of humanity. 5 years ago, it took 388 rich guys to achieve that status. Wow. So look, that's 388 is not a lot of people, but 62.
I mean, this is a perfect study by Oxfam that shows you how this notion of trickle-down economics doesn't work. If we just cut the corporate taxes, and if we allow these, safe havens for people's monies, and if we allow people to outsource, we give them everything that they want, well, they'll become so tremendously wealthy that they'll share their wealth with their employees. But that's not what happens. Oftentimes, they hoard that money, it sits in accounts, or they put it in the stock market, which, by the way, is the main reason why, or one of the main reasons why these people are wealthy. What they do is, of course, they save a tremendous amount of money in taxes, and they invest it. They invest it in the stock market, and their wealth continues to grow. Yeah. They don't share that wealth with the rest of society. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and it could, in some cases, help out some of those corporations, which is supposed to be, the system is supposed to be set up in a way that if they do those sorts of investments, that will then lead to people being hired more, wages potentially going up. But that's not the way that it tends to work. First of all, there are all sorts of industries that you can invest in terms of stocks that don't really end up going to anyone. And then there are others where they take all that money and then they just sit on it. And they just sit on it and they grow technically, but they don't hire more people. They certainly don't raise wages. And that's how they can enrich themselves without it actually being spread around at all.
You already mentioned this, but I want to reiterate that this is not just about the United States. This is about the world population. This is a global study. But nonetheless, it's important to, point to our own failed policies as a model that is not helpful for the middle class or the working class at all, and is also not good for the economy. Because if you've created an economy where millennials, for instance, are now burdened with student loan debt, and they have stagnant wages to also deal with, well, then they can't be part of the economy, whether it's the domestic economy or the global economy, right? They're not going to be able to buy homes. They're not going to be able to buy cars. They're not going to be able to do the same things that the generations before them were able to do. And so if you want a strong economy, you can't allow all the wealth to move up to the top. You need the middle class to be strong enough to actually contribute to the economy. Because remember, if you don't have demand for products, then products aren't going to be sold.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that we saw that over the last 10 to 15 years. A little bit more information from you for you from Oxfam. The wealth of the richest 62% has increased an astonishing 44% since just 5 years ago. 44% in 5 years to $1.76 trillion. Meanwhile, the wealth of the bottom half of the world dropped by 41%. There are people who will see those numbers and think that everything's working fine. And by the way, many of those people are the same people who think that America is overly taxed and overly regulated in terms of businesses. Europe is even worse. China, there's no free market, there's no free capitalism. Then where is all of this coming from, supposedly? Maybe South America is far more dynamic than I think it is. And obviously, they're doing just fine. But the idea that all of these huge regions of the world are just clamping down on capitalism and just crushing rich people under their heels is obviously ridiculous. And we've seen that in just a matter of 5 years. I mean, look, we're looking at not even the whole time since the last recession, a massive upswing in their wealth and then a massive downturn in ours. And it has consequences. There's a wide body of research that shows inequality adversely affects the health of those at the bottom, raising the risk of cardiovascular disease, increasing suicide rates, and shortening lifespans. And I know from the years that I apparently wasted in graduate school that if you want to find something that can be an indicator that political instability and even revolution is a-comin', income inequality is that thing. The parts of the world where you have the most revolutions, and especially the most violent revolutions, tend to be those where people look at their lot in life, and then they look at the people at the top and they say, it is no longer even conceivable that myself or my kids will reach that. Right. And if I have no stake in the current system, then I'm going to burn the system to the ground. And you see a little bit of that in the fascist appeal of Donald Trump, perhaps, and you're certainly seeing it in other parts of the world as well.
So there was a study done by PricewaterhouseCoopers that I can't stop thinking about because it enraged me so much. Now, to be fair to them, they weren't trying to be overly critical of young people, people in our generation. But they were trying to make a point about how our generation is ignorant when it comes to money because we're risk averse, we're unwilling to invest our money into the stock markets. And it bothered me because of a number of different things. First of all, a lot of millennials don't have the disposable income to put into the stock market, right? So this whole notion that they're ignorant because they're not putting their money in the stock market is stupid because they might not have the money to do that because of the financial burdens that they have to cope with, including student loan debt. But in addition to that, whenever millennials do have a little bit of disposable income, do you really think that they want to tie that money to a risky, under-regulated market? Hell no. Okay, I mean, I've talked about the retirement account that I have several times, which, by the way, there's not a lot of money in there, but I just keep losing money. I mean, it's every day I look at it, and this year had a terrible start when it comes to stocks and investments and things like that.
Well,
and I'm
but
like,
you
wait
must
a minute.
feel better now that there's no more risk. The risk was that it would start losing money. Now it's always going to lose money. Risk is gone.
It's a disaster. It's a tremendous disaster. Okay, it's terrible. But my question is, or not my question, it's more of a statement. For the people who want to get rid of Social Security, for the working class Americans in the middle of this country who keep voting in favor of things like trickle-down economics that work against them, and the same people who keep voting against things like Social Security or in favor of politicians that want to cut Social Security, what do you think is going to happen to you? You're barely making any money. You're barely making ends meet. Why would you vote for a politician who wants to take away any type of retirement guarantee that the government can give you and tie all of your retirement savings to a risky market?
Yeah, it's the political elites and the economic elites set up a situation whereby if things don't change, people who are young now are going to be screwed when they get older. And from the time you were 2, a lot of the media has been telling you don't trust liberals, don't trust unions, don't trust anyone who is working to protect you in the way that they and the generations that preceded them were protected from economic instability, political instability, those sorts of things. And that's a terrible situation. The good side is that although Donald Trump is doing very well, when you look at young voters, who are they supporting? They're supporting Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
And so all of that fucking propaganda has apparently not worked on them, at least to some extent. And they understand that change is needed.
And the reason why it hasn't worked on them is because even though our generation continuously gets criticized in the mainstream media, we are constantly put down and belittled. We're more educated than generations before us. And I'm not saying that to look down at people that are older than us. I'm saying it because we have resources that generations before us didn't have. We've grown up with the internet. We have multiple news sources that we can go to when we don't trust what's happening in the mainstream. So we're way more educated than people realize. And I love that. I love that about the young generation. And anytime you read a stupid study from some organization claiming that we're ignorant because we're not putting our money in the stock market, fuck them because they're wrong. By the way, do not put your money in an IRA. Just don't. Don't take financial advice from me. But if you want to take financial advice from me, save your money, and if you can, invest in property for rentals. And do not put your money in IRA.